Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is Harry Brailsford from SMB Nation with the weekly webinar. As always, a little bit of housekeeping up front. Be sure to use the chat feature today to ask your questions, and we'll get those answered. What are we doing at SMB Nation right now? Is like to kind of tell you, what's going on today. So, the last couple of days, I have been attending a social media analytics conference called Lift. So Lift, and it's by a company called Simply Measured. And of course, that's not why we're here today, but over the course of the last year, I've been hitting on the analytics theme. And this is a little bit far afield where, you would want to be studying engagement attribution with Twitter and that kind of thing. So it's a little bit out there, but what the heck, a couple of days of learning something new. So I'm actually coming to you from a hotel lobby as part of that motion. Jenny took a few days of vacation, thank goodness, so she's out recharging. And we have our Tour to Cloud tour coming up. So that's starting in just a couple of weeks down in California. And so it's just as it sounds, tourtocloud.com. You have probably received some emails on that, and it's very, very timely, very contemporary. The lead-off topic is Azure, huge hunger for Azure. The second topic is Office 365, and then I would say a distant third is weaving it all together with Windows 10, but we're finding everybody's pretty comfortable with Windows 10, and to be honest, they're getting comfortable with Office 365, and they're uncomfortable with Azure. So Grant is at it again. He's our speaker. Speaking of which, Grant's at Ignite next week in Atlanta, the Microsoft conference Ignite. So, raise your hand, shoot me mail or something if you'd like to see Grant. He's putting together a little reception. I think he's got 10 people signed up at Ignite for like a breakfast gathering just to yak and geek out. So that's Grant. And then speaking of which, with StorageCraft and the emphasis this year on analytics, this Sunday in the Sunday paper, I will have some analysis of something StorageCraft announced this week. They acquired analytics firm. They acquired the intellectual property from an analytics firm, and so they're now starting to slice and dice and visualize and look at the data that they work with. I want to put this in perspective because big data is a dangerous word, and it means a lot of things to a lot of people. So this is one area of analytics. Every industry has their own data, and they know their data best. But catch the Sunday paper. Typically publishes about noon Pacific on Sunday. With that said, I'm going to bring in Martin from StorageCraft. We're having a hybrid conversation. So Martin, hello, sir. Where are you located today? Can you hear me okay? I can see your screen, so I'll hand you the talking stick.
All right, that sounds good. Thanks, Harry. Yeah, so my name is Martin Merrill. I'm a sales engineer for StorageCraft. I'm actually speaking to you out of our beautiful headquarters facility in Draper, Utah. Anybody familiar with Utah at all might know that Draper is just kind of south of Salt Lake. So we're all part of that big metropolitan conglomerate of cities right around the Salt Lake City area, and that's currently where I'm coming to you from. And today I've got on a series of a little presentation actually to share regarding best practices for backup in a hybrid environment, and that's what I'm going to be sharing.
Well, let's jump right into it, and folks, be sure to ask your questions. We'll answer. Martin, is it okay to ask questions along the way, or do you prefer to have the questions at the end of the presentation?
No, along the way is actually just fine. I don't mind being interrupted if there's something pertinent. Sometimes answering the questions right away kind of keep the topics fresh on people's minds, and I think that might be a great idea actually.
Perfect.
All right. Okay, so again, to reiterate, we are going to be talking about best practices for on-site and off-site recovery in hybrid environments. And what we're talking about particularly is backup and restore, all right, the topic that everybody knows about and hears about on a regular basis. But it's also, when you're talking about backup and disaster recovery, you need to get your head around the things that are really going to make it effective. The last thing you want is to find yourself in a scenario where you think you're doing just fine. You're backing up, everything is going just fine as far as you know, and then when you actually do end up with your disaster, you find yourself in a scenario where your backups aren't even working, or you haven't practiced well enough, you don't know exactly what needs to be restored, and the recovery ends up taking much longer than you actually expected it to be. And there's a number of different ways in which you can prepare and guard against that type of a situation so that you can make sure that you are recovering successfully in any kind of a situation that you run into. All right, so we're going to be covering a couple of these little best practices, and of course, if you do have questions, feel free to write them in. Harry's going to be taking a look at those, and again, feel free to interrupt me while I'm going through the presentation. But to start things out with, let's kind of get our brains wrapped around the whole idea of, the key, I don't know, I guess the key metrics that you're going to be looking at when it comes to backup and disaster recovery. And for those of you that have been in the IT crowd for a little while, you probably already have a good understanding that a good solid backup is going to accomplish two particular things. One of them is to establish and actually fall within an active RTO and RPO. Your recovery time objective, your RTO, is a guideline to help. It's something that you can establish that will allow you to determine how long can I actually afford to have one of my machines be down. All right, a mission critical machine. Let's say I'm dealing with my Exchange server. I'm backing that up regularly, but in my mind, backing up regularly is every hour or whatever. And I've got a backup solution in place that should work just fine. And but if I find myself without that Exchange server at any point in time, how long is it going to take for me to actually restore that? Or how long is it going to take for me to actually get that system back online again? That's your recovery time objective. You're going to want to determine what that's going to be as you're building out your disaster recovery plan. If you can't afford to have that machine down for any more than 10 minutes, you got to make sure that your recovery solution can get that system back up in 10 minutes. Otherwise, it's going to adversely affect what it is that your company is doing. So the way that you're actually going to define your RTO is to determine how much does this cost me for each minute of downtime, each minute, each hour, each day of downtime. And if it's something that your business requires in order to continue to bring in revenue on an hour-by-hour, day-by-day basis, what you'll be doing is saying, okay, if it costs me $2,400 every hour because my machine is utilized that much and is that important to me, if it's down for an hour, I've lost $2,400. Can I afford that? Can I afford 2 hours? Can I only afford less than that? And so that's what you're going to be determining when you look at that RTO. How much is it actually going to cost me, and does my current backup solution actually meet the RTO that I have defined for myself? If you can't afford to have that machine down for more than an hour, then your backup and disaster recovery solution better get you back online within an hour, or it's going to start costing you. All right? That's RTO. Now, RPO is a little bit different. This is your recovery point objective. Your recovery point objective helps you determine how much data can I actually afford to lose? Okay, the question you're going to ask is, all right, my backups are being launched every hour, every day, maybe once a week. Okay, is that going to be sufficient? If I find myself in a scenario where an important machine has died, or I've lost data, and my last backup was a week ago, and I know that I'm going to have to recover, or I'm going to have to at least recreate some of that data representing a week's worth of work, is that something that I can do, and is that something that it is not going to adversely affect me or my organization very much? You have to answer these types of questions. And again, you're going to be quantifying that RPO by way of how much revenue is going to be lost. If it takes your developers a week and a half to recreate a project they've been working on, and your last backup was last month, okay, you're going to find yourself in a scenario where a lot of work is going to have to be redone. So when you're looking at addressing recovery point objective, you're going to be looking at your current backup solution and going, okay, how frequently am I taking backups? All right, do I need to take backups more frequently? And I think you'll see as we go through the presentation today, we're going to address a couple of these things, but on the tip of your mind, the whole idea behind these good best practices we're going to be discussing is to make sure that the backup solution that you have in place is going to get you back online very, very quickly. We're going to give you the strategies that you're going to want to look at when addressing how frequently you should be taking those backups, and what needs to be deployed in order to make sure that your backup and disaster recovery system is actually in good shape. All right, everybody does backup, but finding the right solution for you and making sure that it's got the tools that are needed to fit within your organization and get things going is actually very, very important. So when we're talking about backup in general, there are a couple of essentially you're dealing with something that's going to be able to take all the backup data within your environment, both servers and desktops, and we're going to be storing that data on some location, some storage, okay? The most simple way to do backup would be to plug in a USB drive into your server and back up to that USB drive. I mean, backup can be that simple. It doesn't have to be a complicated thing. At its most basic level, just remember what you're doing is you're taking the data that you need and you're going to store it on some device, okay? Storage device, NAS device, USB drive. If you've got a SAN and you've carved out a LUN with a bunch of data, or a bunch of storage available on it and you want to use that, that's absolutely just fine. Okay, backing up to tape. Again, that's something that a lot of people are still doing and having a way to archive important files and all that. Definitely all there. But on the most basic level, when you back up, you're just going to take your backup data and put it on some kind of storage. Okay, and so that's still what we're doing with. We're not going to complicate the process by talking about these 5 best practices. We're still sticking within this whole, this very simple idea of taking your data and putting it someplace else. But having your data locally isn't always the very best thing to do. Okay, it's great to have your backup. If your NAS device or whatever that's acting as your storage is in a closet someplace, for most day-to-day activity, that's going to be fine. Having it locally is going to allow you easy access to those backup files so that you can restore quickly in scenarios where you might have deleted a file or you need to do some kind of recovery. However, it's not going to guard against those types of scenarios where you might have actually there we go. Just about messed up my slides here. Oh, all right. Well, it looks like we skipped through something. But essentially, you want to also make sure that your backup data goes off-site. You want to put it someplace where it's not necessarily going to be in danger if you do have some kind of catastrophic problem. All right, having your data in a closet, within your main facility is great to start with, but you also want to make sure that your backup solution is able to take that backup data and place it someplace else. This could be a data center that you've got in a second site for your organization. Maybe you're going to contract with some third-party organization who's going to provide some storage. Pay a fee per month to keep that data there. That's another option for you. There are tools, or there are different tools and products out there with Amazon, AWS, or Azure that are definitely locations where you can send your backup data and keep them. We'll talk a little more about those in just a little bit, but making sure that you've got your backup data off-site is also a very important piece of your backup and disaster recovery solution. Now, when it comes to recovery, I like to kind of go back to this little quotable by a man named I don't even know if I'm saying this right, but Jaime, or I don't know, but Casquillo. I don't even know who he is, but I came across this and I thought, it actually applies, I think, to what it is that we're talking about. Resilience is all about being able to overcome the unexpected, and sustainability is about survival, and the goal of resilience is to thrive, okay? Your backup and disaster recovery is going to help you to become more resilient, all right? If you lose your data, and especially any modern day organization now, if you lose your data, no matter what that critical data may represent, you're actually at risk of potentially losing your company. You're going bankrupt or just not being able to do a full recovery and have the business the way that it once was. With a good backup and disaster recovery solution in place, not only can you restore, but you're actually being resilient. And if you are successfully resilient, then your organization is going to be able to thrive. And I like that. There's a nice little correlation
Martin?
there as I look at this. Yes, Harry.
Yeah, Martin. Just to clarify, and you know me, I'm a little chippy. We have to have fun. We've got to keep it fun. But now you know who your CEO is. You had a comment fly by about you may not know who this one individual was, but just to clarify, you know your CEO at StorageCraft, I'm assuming, sir.
Oh yes, absolutely, yes, Matt Badero.
Okay, because that could be a career-limiting move, my friend.
Yeah, no, that's very Very good point, Harry. Thank you for keeping me on my toes. Yeah, I do know. I do know my CEO. That's a very good question.
Okay, please continue.
All right, very good. Okay, so let's talk about our first little best practice we're going to discuss, okay? Frequent backups. So going back to that whole idea of your RPO, the recovery point objective, you want to make sure that you don't have to, recreate a whole bunch of data if you find yourself in a scenario where you've actually had some kind of a disaster. All right. Again, going back to that whole idea, if you're taking weekly full backups and that's the only backup you're taking, you got to remember, you may have backups that are a week old when you finally have an issue where you either lost data or whatever, and you're going to have to go back to a week ago before you can finally restore or find a file or even restore a system, which means that you've now lost a week's worth of work and data. So is it appropriate to back up once a week? For some devices, it might be. Web server that doesn't see much change, yeah, maybe once a week ought to be okay. Your Exchange server, yeah, probably not. Okay, if it's your SQL server and it's powering a CRM and you're seeing a lot of activity day by day, no. Once a week is not going to cut it. Once a day probably won't even cut it. You're going to want to look and see if you can't take backups much more frequently. Okay. Now, along with that, you also want to make sure that what you're dealing with is a good, solid backup. Sometimes file and folder isn't going to cut it. File and folder is great if you want to be able to restore just those individual critical files, and there's lots of applications out there that do that. If you work with the right kind of analytic software, it can help you find those specific files that you want to be able to back up. I mean, not all data is created equal. But outside of that, when it comes to real recovery, you probably want to go with something that's image-based. An image-based backup solution is going to take a complete image of the system that's being backed up. All right, way back when, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Ghost, which is this great little imaging software that allowed you to take a complete image of a machine and be able to restore it exactly the way that it was to some other device, or rebuild it to a particular point in time. And it was easy. It's a click of a button for the most part, and you're able to do a recovery. So image-based restores actually help out a lot in terms of being able to have a very flexible or resilient recovery. Okay. In addition, you want to make sure that it's scalable. You want to make sure the solution you have in place is going to be able to accommodate additional data, resizing of your volumes when it comes time to restore, making sure that you've got plenty of data available to accommodate additional changes as time goes on. And you also want to make sure that it will accommodate hybrid environments. Okay, what am I talking about when I say hybrid environments? Well, we're talking about differences in hardware. If you've got an image-based backup solution and it's backing up a Dell machine, but then you find yourself in a scenario where your budget it makes more sense to start purchasing HP, and the Dell machine fails, and so now you've got the budget to buy a brand new HP server or something. Are you going to be able to recover to that HP, given that there's a lot of proprietary hardware in that Dell machine that might not be represented? I mean, do you have a solution that's going to take care of that? When it comes to hybrid environments, we might also be talking about virtual machines versus physical machines. Sometimes you have a physical machine that has failed, and honestly, the direction that the company is taking is, we really want to go virtual anyway. Can you restore to a virtual machine with the solution that you currently have in place? Another thing about hybrid environments you might want to consider is operating systems. Does your solution back up more than just one single operating system? Most applications out there are going to be Windows aware and running Windows just fine. Will that same solution also back up a Linux environment? So there's all sorts of different variables that come into play when we're talking about hybrid environments. Hardware, virtual machines, operating systems, all those need to be taken into consideration. The StorageCraft product that we offer, I can actually say, with a lot of surety and confidence, we can actually manage, all of those with the different recovery tools that we offer. The fact that we do great hardware independent restore from one particular hardware platform to another, from hardware into virtual machines, all of that is definitely accomplished through our recovery environment. And you're going to want to be looking for those types of solutions to make sure that you've got the flexibility that you need for a good, solid recovery. Also, and I have addressed this, you want to do an on-site backup. I run across a lot of clients that I talk to, and they've got some solution in place, for some reason I'm having a little bit of a link, but I think Mozy, some of these others that actually back up directly to a cloud-based environment, which is great. You want to back up your critical files, make sure they're safe, but also remember they're off-site. They're not easily accessible if all you need is a single file to restore? Or, how long is it going to take you to download a complete set of all of your files if you need to use them to do a full recovery to a machine that has failed on you? On-site recovery or on-site backup is actually what you probably want to look at first. And if you want your data off-site, you may want to replicate to the off-site location instead. On-site backup is critical. It addresses most system outages very, very quickly. Okay? If you've got your backup data, like I said before, all saved in a closet somewhere at your headquarters, that data is right there. It's readily available. You can restore from it. Your recovery process is going to be much faster than having to wait for that data to be sent to you or downloaded, which could take hours or days depending on how much data we're looking at. All right, so on-site backup is going to be key in giving you the resiliency that you want when it comes time to actually do any kind of recovery. Best practices number 2, managing your backups. Okay, kind of going back to my point earlier, making sure that your backup images are good so that they don't, so that you can actually use them when the time comes, it is also very, very important. You like what it says there, don't let a recovery be your first test. Again, being in the backup and disaster recovery business, I talk to a lot of partners, I talk to a lot of clients, and I chat with them about what it is that they're currently doing for backup. Some of them look at me with these little glazed eyes going, backup? I don't even have time for that. Sometimes they'll say, we're backing up, and everything just seems great. And then I'll follow up and say, okay, for those of you who are backing up, are you testing your backups? And then again, we get these glazed glances, and they're like, oh, well, I don't really have time for that. And, it's very, very important to make sure that you've got a solution in place that allows you to test your backups. Okay, don't let your initial recovery be your very first test. And there's tools out there. I mean, the worst case scenario, yes, it may require you to stay after hours for a few hours, shut down your production machine, do a mock restore, see if you can grab the files and folders. It's going to take a little bit of manpower. So at the worst case scenario, yes, it might be a little extra work, but that work is going to be worth it in the when the time finally comes and you know what to expect. You know that your backups are in good shape. You want to test them. Best case scenarios, there's software out there that allows for a quick and easy test of those backups. StorageCraft, for example, we do offer a feature called Virtual Boot. The whole idea behind Virtual Boot is to actually bring the system back online, reading directly from your backup images, which, by the way, are actually saved in our own proprietary format. But we can actually bring the system back online, opening up those backup images in a matter of just a few minutes, and doing a virtual boot like this allows us to get a system up and running, test the applications, takes just a few minutes, you can shut it down, and you've successfully tested your backups. Definitely something you may want to look into. Look for applications and recovery services that can actually do something quick and easy like that, because testing is very, very important. Don't let a recovery be your first test, people, please. You're going to find yourself probably in a world of hurt, especially if you find out that those backup images don't work. They become corrupted or whatever. Along that same line, practiced recoveries. Okay, if you really want to be resilient in your backup and disaster recovery, in an actual restore situation, you want to make sure that not only are you testing your backups, but set aside some time and actually practice a restore so that you know what the software or the recovery solution that you're dealing with is actually going to do. It gives you the opportunity to kind of iron out those little gotchas that you may run into. Okay, if you're rebuilding a machine as a virtual machine, what are all the different things that may need to be addressed? Is networking going to be able to be set up appropriately? This is going to help you to plan ahead and know exactly what needs to happen. And do it more than once. Things change within an organization. IT managers get promoted. They leave the company. New people are brought on board, and you want to make sure that whoever it is that's going to be quote unquote in charge when a scenario like that happens, you're going to be able to do a successful recovery because you've practiced it. System machine A has failed. What's it like to actually do a restore? Do you have a quick and easy failover solution? What's the process to do that? Is my networking set up correctly? Do all my applications launch? Which ones need to launch first in order for my system to be rebuilt appropriately? That's the type of stuff you're going to learn if you're doing practiced recoveries. Also, in order to make sure that your backup images or the backup files that you have are always in good shape, make sure that you're utilizing some kind of a management tool. All right. Again, most applications out there, most backup and disaster recovery solutions out there have got some kind of monitoring tool that will keep tabs on what's going on within those backup files themselves. It's going to check against corrupted files. It's going to check if you do have an image-based setup in place where you're taking incrementals. It'll make sure that a complete path to the full backup through incrementals and everything is going to be okay. If that path is ever broken or if a file ever becomes corrupted, the monitoring tool in advance of an actual disaster is going to notify you. Okay? You want to make sure that you've got the monitoring tools in place and working. Get to know them. Find out what your backup and disaster recovery solution offers in that regard. Because again, this is going to guard against you standing there with your pants down when that actual disaster actually hits, and you'll be prepared. And the next thing you know, you're the hero. You got everything back online again. You planned ahead. So test, do practiced recoveries. Make sure your backups are being checked for integrity. They're being monitoring using the tools that are put out by the software manufacturer that provides your backup and disaster recovery solution. Okay, moving forward. Number 3, what's another good best practice here? Well, consider using a BDR device instead of just typical dumb storage. Now, dumb storage makes it sound like I'm being mean, but no, I'm not talking down to the storage. What I'm actually doing is saying, if you have a BDR device it actually stands for Backup and Disaster Recovery Device. But what a BDR actually is a storage repository, but it's also got an operating system on it that allows for recovery tools to literally be installed on it itself. It'll act as not just the repository for those backup images or those backup files, but also provide the tools needed to manage those backups, to connect to the machines that are being backed up, and from a single pane of glass, so to speak, you can create backup jobs on all the different endpoints that need to be backed up, provides all the recovery tools that are needed to get your files and folders recovered. If you do have a system that allows for virtualization of your backup images, that can actually act as the host. In a StorageCraft scenario, it's simply because that's the world that I live in, a BDR is actually encouraged quite a bit because it can launch a virtual boot kind of a scenario or bring the system back online and act as a host of a machine that has actually failed. In fact, let's go ahead and take that little diagram that we talked about earlier. All right, if you've got a good disaster recovery device in place, an actual BDR, if you do find yourself in a scenario where one of your machines has failed, and you can take a look at our graphic here, one of them is caught on fire, and it's no longer functional. Well, the great thing about having your local BDR device means that you can actually start restoring or performing recovery actions on the device itself. All right, you don't need to wait for a brand new device to come in that you can do a full-scale restore to. Instead, you can go ahead and enable the virtualization feature within the BDR, launch a virtual machine from the backup images that you have, and you can actually host it there for a period of time. And that machine will actually act as a replacement for the machine that has actually failed. Again, for a period of time. It's kind of it's your spare tire approach, so to speak. All right? And you're going to run that as long as you need to on the BDR device itself. You'll reroute networking as needed. If you do things right, you probably don't need to reroute anything. You'll just go ahead and enable the bridge. It'll keep the same IP settings that the production machine did. And if you got the right solution in place, it can continue to take backups while it's launched. So that as you're waiting for new hardware to come in, or as you're building a new system, and this machine is actually acting as a production machine, we're going to be able to keep track of whatever those changes are that are happening. If it's your Exchange server, we're going to be able to keep track of what's going on in that. If it's a database server, we're going to keep track of everything. And when the brand new machine is finally available, and you've got it up and running, or you've got it ready for a full-scale recovery, you'll go ahead, lay the image backups back onto that machine, rebuild it, and at that point in time, you can shut down the machine on the BDR device. But the importance of using a BDR device is going to, again, make you more resilient. We're going to get you recovered faster. We're going to make it easier for a restore to actually happen. It's a much better solution than waiting until you've got new hardware in place before you can actually perform the recovery. Okay, and again, this is where an image-based backup is going to be very, very helpful. Talking about restores in general, if you are talking about a complete system restore, if all you're doing is file and folder backup, and you do find yourself in a scenario where you've actually had a machine that has failed, and you have to rebuild or whatever, keep in mind the recovery in a file and folder backup solution is actually going to be several stages instead of just one. You're going to have to, get the new hardware first. Then you're going to have to install the operating system. All right, you're going to have to configure all the drivers, make sure all the hardware is currently functioning. Then you can finally start adding your applications, installing all of your applications, and then once that's completed, you can finally get to the point where you're recovering the actual data to that machine. Multiple steps.
Hey, Martin?
Quite a bit longer. Yes, go ahead, Harry.
Yeah, Martin, let me just interrupt you. Folks, it's the bottom of the hour, so we're at midpoint or so. And if you came in late, this is the weekly webinar. We're talking backup, disaster recovery, and hybrid with StorageCraft today. A little bit of housekeeping that I'll repeat. Please use the question feature to ask your questions. And next week, if you're at Microsoft Ignite, a very large conference in Atlanta, our own Grant Thompson will be there, and he's putting together some kind of gathering, a breakfast. If you'd like to participate in that, I think he's got 10 people lined up, and you could certainly join Grant for breakfast and geek out. Then the following week, we launch our fall tour to cloud, and so we're going to be in 3 cities in California the following week. Grant's our lead instructor on that one, so tourtocloud.com, and be sure to ask your questions. Martin, back to you.
Thank you very much. Let's see, where was I? So yeah, I was talking about when it comes to image-based versus file restore. Image-based backup is going to work much better with a BDR type of environment than a typical file and folder restore, because it's a single process. Open up a virtual, open up your backup images set as a virtual machine, launch it in a single step, you're up and running. Whereas you got to go through those several different steps. So again, that was actually kind of an aside, but I hope that I got the message across there. Okay, so the fourth option here. Now we're calling it ingenious ways to replicate your data offsite. I don't know how ingenious it is necessarily, but there are some strategies you can take when it comes to replicating your backup data. Okay, first let's address where you're going to replicate your backup data to. All right, and again, this is actually going to help you determine the ease of recovery. Private cloud, there's a lot of organizations out there that have multiple sites. Okay, and in a scenario like that, it's a great idea to take advantage of each additional site as locations you can keep the backup images. So you're going to back up locally first, for sure. But if my initial location is in San Diego, California, but I do happen to have another site, a facility out in Denver, utilize that site in Denver. Go ahead and configure a machine that can receive the backup data and host it at Denver, so that you've got your backup data in 2 different locations. Now, of course, that's 2 different locations, and there are certain potential disasters that can happen in either. A bad blizzard, maybe even a forest fire or something like that in Denver, perhaps earthquakes and flooding or whatever in California. But the thing is you've got your backup data in 2 different locations. Or if you really want to play it safe, send your backup data to Kansas City, in a bunker below the ground or something like that, if you happen to have a site like that. But those are kind of things you want to consider. Take advantage of your current resources if you can. When it comes to private, we're calling it the private cloud, but essentially being able to take advantage of your own resources if you've got separate locations to back your data up to. There's also the options of a public cloud. Okay, this would be your Dropbox accounts, your Microsoft Azure, your AWS, being able to take advantage of online stores that you might be paying a monthly fee for. There are a number of different services that can be purchased, which allows for which can provide an easier access to putting your data into those clouds. But again, what you're actually replicating are the backup files themselves. We're not necessarily backing up directly to them. We're taking a backup image, saving it locally, and then we're replicating those backup images into the cloud, and that's what you're actually going to want to be storing.
Sir,
yes, sir.
I do have a question from an individual that I'll answer, but I also wanted to make a comment that,
Sure.
this slide, sir, could be a 3-day conference unto itself. I mean, you're boiling the ocean with some of those words, my friend. Those are big areas of study, and I know you're focused on the topic, but boy, this is a big conversation. In all seriousness, William Bowdy is asking, will slides and the recording of this webinar be sent as links to attendees? The short answer should be yes. We certainly will send you the replay link. And Martin, I guess our practice was I believe historically you do make the slide deck available as a PDF. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. If you could get that over to me, because I get the thank you note out Friday, so that'd be great. Please continue, Martin.
Very good, very good. Yes, we can definitely get that out to you. Okay, so to finish off on our options for the different clouds, there's also the purpose-built cloud. There are organizations out there, backup and disaster recovery software, and companies similar to StorageCraft that actually have their own clouds, purpose-built for recovery, where they've actually built in services or offerings that once your backup data is housed within these purpose-built clouds, we allow for additional recovery actions to be created. The StorageCraft Cloud, which we've now been offering for the last couple of years, since 2012 actually, is actually a purpose-built cloud, which allows us to be able to provide recovery options to our clients and our partners by simply logging into our cloud services portal. If they find themselves in a scenario where they need an individual file or a folder to download, they can log in using their credentials into the StorageCraft Cloud, find the backup data they need, and recover individual files and folders. It's a great option in scenarios where you've lost your backup, maybe you've had a disaster, but it doesn't require an actual failover to something physical or something that's a complete recovery or something like that. But you do need to get some files. Absolutely, we have access to them, and you can download the files that you need. Purpose-built cloud. We also offer a feature where we can do a virtual boot into our cloud, and we'll host virtual machines, those critical machines, provide VPN access to them. And again, a lot of these services can be found across a number of different vendors, and it's something that you're definitely going to want to look at, especially when it comes to, again, that whole key idea of being resilient. All right, what are the different options that you have to get things back online very, very quickly, even if you've lost everything? Because that's kind of what we're talking about next. Again, you also want to make sure that you're syncing your data. Okay, the replication feature that you're using, is it going to be the replication feature built into the NAS so that you can replicate from NAS A to NAS B? That's definitely an option for you. But is it going to be checking the files to make sure that they are all in sync? All right, does it recognize and understand how your backup chain fits together and how all the different files are dependent on each other? So again, you kind of start needing to think, all right, when it comes to replication, what tools are at my disposal and which tools should I actually be using? In most cases, if a repository that just happens to be a Synology NAS, for example, ends up being your initial repository, and you want to replicate, and Synology has an option to replicate to a second Synology device at an offsite location, that's probably fine. But what might be better is check and see what your disaster recovery vendor has to offer. StorageCraft has a tool called ImageManager, and ImageManager knows and understands the file formats that we use and how they interact with each other, so that when you are syncing from one location to another, those backup image sets are going to be the same. And you're not going to be losing data, or you're not going to be losing dependencies from one file to the other as those backup images are being sent to the secondary location. In addition to that, you want to set up a scenario where you're not sending just these huge pieces of data all the time. If your backup and disaster recovery option supports full backups plus incremental backups, be sure to include the incremental option, especially if it's an option that goes with a continuous or a never-ending incremental type of a scenario where you've got a full backup and then you can schedule incremental backups after that. The reason being is once you've got that initial full backup replicated to the offsite location, that's actually the biggest beast. That could be the pain in the neck to try to get over, but once it's over there, your incrementals are much, much smaller, replicating across the WAN is going to be much, much easier, especially if you're utilizing something like FTP, to get your backup data to the offsite location. So using incrementals, or even a combination of fulls plus incrementals is definitely going to be a lot easier than taking regular fulls only and trying to push those full backups across, on a daily basis or even a weekly basis offsite. So that's definitely something you want to be looking at. That's a final piece there. It doesn't necessarily fit, I don't think, in this particular slide where it says pre-staged VMs offsite. Again, this kind of goes to that whole idea of a purpose-built cloud. It's look again. If you want to use a purpose-built cloud, see if it's got a function that allows you to bring a virtual machine of your images up online and host it there. So again, why offsite replication? Well, the offsite relocation option is because of this. You lose everything locally. You really do have that terrible disaster. Your facility catches fire. The tornado comes and rips through your facility. You have a flood. Heaven forbid you're in Florida and the hurricane comes in and pretty much wipes out your entire town. Whatever that is, you want to make sure that backup data is available offsite. And better yet, have a BDR set up at the offsite location so that you can do a recovery very, very quickly, and again, be resilient and get things up and running as quick as you can as soon as that disaster has ended. Okay, so that's what we're talking about when it comes to replicating offsite. Now, again, I don't know how ingenious that was, but replicating your backup data, very, very important, making sure that you've got that data available offsite. All right, and then finally, make sure that you have a number of different recovery options. Okay, now. We're talking about on-site recovery, off-site recovery, and practice. And honestly, I'm not going to really address those particular options, but instead, as far as multiple recovery options, utilize a solution that allows for you to be able to restore files and folders. Okay, a solution that does allow you to bring the system back online very, very quickly as a virtual machine. Those types of features are going to get you back online very, very quickly. All right, StorageCraft allows you to be able to open up a backup image at any point in time in your backup chain, find a file that you need, and recover it in a matter of a minute. In less than a minute. Okay, you want to make sure that you've got a solution in place. I get asked all the time, well, you guys are an image-based backup. Are you able to just restore files and folders? Because I'm kind of concerned that I'm going to have to restore my entire image set just to get a specific file back. If you're dealing with a backup solution that requires that, you may want to reconsider. Again, how resilient are you if you have to do a complete image restore to get a single file? All right, so those are the types of questions you get to ask yourself. Is this all going to fall within my recovery time objective? What am I actually implementing here for my backup solution? In addition to that, being able to do a quick restore. The highest end solutions out there will actually set up failover clusters in scenarios where you have a machine that has failed. Well, not everybody can afford something like that. Particularly smaller businesses, are not going to be able to afford the hardware nor the clustering software and everything that is needed. That doesn't look very good, but I think we still got some time. Being able to have a flexible machine, a flexible recovery environment that allows you to bring up a virtual machine, the whole BDR device. Bring up a virtual machine very, very quickly. You want to be able to restore from one device to another device and utilize the same, utilize different hardware and that type of thing. So again, multiple recovery options. That's the kind of stuff I wanted to mention in that particular regard. The automation tools, again, if you've got some tools that automate restores, absolutely take advantage of those things as well. But that's pretty much it. Those 5 different recovery options are going to help you become very, very resilient. And then when it comes right down to it, we've got one last quotable that I want to share from a guy named Simon. I think his last name is Sinek. But look at what he says here. Panic causes tunnel vision. Now, calm acceptance of danger in advance allows us to more easily assess the situation and actually see the options. And I kind of want you to think about that for a minute. Panic, it really does kind of, it does cause tunnel vision. I don't know if anybody's ever been in a situation, hopefully not, but where they've actually been like, oh crap, they're in a situation, panic sets in, hopefully it's not, danger to yourself or whatever, but anybody that's found themselves in a scenario where they've panicked, maybe because a deadline is looming and they haven't done what they needed to do. But it causes tunnel vision. It makes them to start thinking not about the whole picture. If you can avoid that panic, you're going to be able to be much more at ease when you actually do have some kind of a disaster. And when you just kind of are able to sit back and calmly go, yep, this is my situation. I just lost my machine. I've got to get that restored. But if you put a plan in place, it allows you to actually accept it, because otherwise you will be in the panic. So we're going to go ahead and close this up. Guys, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Let me finish by just giving us a shameless plug real fast about StorageCraft. We're actually always looking for opportunities to chat with new partners, new clients, and share what it is that we have to offer. The StorageCraft service is very, very compelling when it comes to backup and disaster recovery. If you have any interest in learning more about us, please feel free to check us out at storagecraft.com and check out our partner portal, our partner programs, and see if that's something that might just be right for you. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and close everything up. Harry, thank you so much for this time. This has been great for me. I turn the time back over to you.
Yep, absolutely. So, folks, thanks for attending. A little bit of housekeeping. First of all, during this webinar, they confirmed in the Wall Street Journal a huge data breach over at Yahoo. So once you log off of this webinar, go change your password over there. 500 million people affected, Martin. That just came down. Sat on a screen, mounted screen up here, and then. Folks, Tour to Cloud starts in 2 weeks in California. Next week, grants at Ignite. And, you know, that last slide you had, Martin, it kind of reminds me of a big red coffee cup that says, keep calm and carry on. So why don't we make that the final word, my friend? Thanks for joining us. Folks, we'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.